Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Professor Hamamoto, and the time is 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, and the date is March 9, year 2025. I apologize for allowing for, I guess it's daylight savings time, and I got wrapped up into the last minute research. So, consequently, a lot of you are going to be missing the live stream, but hopefully, it'll replay without any problem on TubeView. So let me begin. I have a lot of material I have to present to you in a host of really complex, intertwined topics. But what I wanted to do today, hi, William Welch and Truth Handler in the live chat. I'm glad you're able to find me. But I'm going to be dividing this talk into two main but related parts. One is dealing with the science of what I call the biocide, the biogenetic degradation of the environment. I'm going to deal with the science without going too deeply into the tall weeds because none of us here, or most of us here, are not hard scientists, right? But the second part is equally important. It's related, and that's the ideological and the cultural movement. I'd say it's as strong as a movement, a very well-funded, politically powerful movement to eradicate the human and animal and plant life forms as we know it. And this is what I refer to under this descriptor biogenetic degradation. And it is on purpose that this program is being enacted. It's not an accident. And importantly, it's not due to a lack of science, not due to a lack of scientific knowledge. As my friend and colleague Lena Poo likes to say, the science is in. We have the science down pat. It's really a political question at this point, whether we're going to allow the perpetrators of these mass crimes against humanity and against the animal and plant kingdom, whether these criminals are going to be allowed to get away with this massive program of bio re-engineering, if not extinction. And you're going to see more closely, I think, more graphically what I'm referring to in the abstract when we get to the second part of this talk, where I will be bringing out examples drawn from science fiction, literature, film. Of course, independent media is full of these ideologues. We'll see a couple of them in the early part of this talk. And recently, I've been revisiting the Alien series that was kicked off by Ridley Scott. And I went ahead last night and ordered, I think, the first four of them, Aliens, and Alien 3. And I'll be watching the more recent ones too, which are the prequels to the classic Alien story, because what Ridley Scott's handlers were, and James Cameron later, and I think another couple other directors, were really trying to communicate is this new biogenetic reality that's being ushered in by these forces that we're only dimly aware of. We're gaining more knowledge of them, but we know that they are highly evolved from the standpoint of technology, and they could even be off-planet entities. This is a discussion that's taking place right now. People like Dr. Stephen Greer and many, many others. I don't mean to shortchange them. I just mentioned him because I recently ordered a couple of his brand new publications in the area related to the so-called UFO phenomena. These are all of a piece, and extraterrestrial so-called visitations. All these discussions are roiling as we trudge on and closer and deeper into the 21st century. And our leadership is very much involved with it. And I'm not just talking about the elected leadership. We know about Donald Trump and his Doge helper, Elon Musk, but some of the hidden legislators who are wearing the white coats, the jackets. We know some of the more prominent names, right? Peter Hotez and the person he replaced, Anthony Fauci. But most of these people are members of hereditary bloodlines who we have only dim knowledge of. And many, if not most of the key ones that remain, because some of them have gone out of existence over the past few decades, but some remain, are still very much in charge. But their geographic location appears to be Switzerland. Right, and we know it's the black Venetian capital, banking capital of the world. And what this is at bottom is this control of the world, global, and local economies. And how do you do that? You control the resources that are on planet Earth and the human beings, the human life forms, and the animals, by extension, that are part of this world. All right. And in order to help me understand this ongoing project that I have taken upon myself, I'm going to be watching the Alien series again. I'm doing a lot of the academic research, some of which I'll share with you today, but not to the point of boredom, right? Because a lot of it is arcane, admittedly, and a lot of it is just these internal discussions amongst scientists within the scientific community. And one such example of this is the Monsanto Papers. The subtitle is Corruption of Science and Grievous Harm to Public Health. Wow, isn't RFK Jr. involved with that? Yes, he is. He's one of many voices that are now not only being heard, but are being put in positions where they can make a change in this headlong rush to mass extinction. I should warn you, there's another book called the Monsanto Papers, which I haven't read. Those are the papers themselves that were apparently obtained through different nefarious, let's say, means that formed a more concrete idea of what these people were up to, the Monsanto people. This particular book, this volume, the Monsanto Papers, has to do with the career of an eminent scientist by the name of Gilles-Eric Seralini. And he is a professor at the University of Caen, C-A-E-N, in France. I won't go through his curriculum vitae, but let's just say briefly that he's at the highest level of his profession, recognized by his peers, honorific bodies within his university. Let's see what his area is. It's very small print. He's been working in this area of GMOs, and I can't read it, it's too small. The font size here with my low lighting. But he's been working in the area of pesticides and GMOs, genetically modified organisms. And we're going to go beyond that in this talk. Not so deeply because we only have 60 minutes, but to the point where we're going to be talking about engineered life forms such that we're being previewed in Alien and Aliens and Alien 3, right? I'm getting ahead of myself, but and this includes a discussion of Harold Kautzvela. Remember him? But not too long ago, he was lecturing about black goo. This was a colloquial term for a life form that existed somewhere between life and death. This is a third level of existence. And empirically, it's beginning to be recognized as a researchable topic, not just grist for the mill amongst the conspiratorial people like you and me. And I mean it in the most affectionate manner possible. Right? The conspiracy theorist of today is the seer, SEER of the future, right? And of course, this relates to that story of Max Spiers. Is it Spear or Spears? Spier, who died or was killed while he was on a lecture tour in Poland. He was in a super soldier program, and I'm going to let you decide whether his story holds water or not. Some of you are not familiar with it. It's been suppressed, but I encourage you to do the research on that. So you can just see by benefit of this introduction that the topic is very wide, it's very broad, and it admits everybody, every sentient human being that's paying half attention is involved with this discussion. It's that important. So I thank my people on Patreon for funding me and allowing me to buy this research material. I thank you, the regular viewers, as well as newly subscribed people to this channel and new Patreons that are coming on board all the time. Thank you very much for your support of last week's talk, which, so far as I'm concerned, my channel's concerned, went quote unquote viral. I think it has over 70,000 views, and that's a record. That's a personal best for me. So that's just to say that we and I am very much in tune with this discussion. And obviously, there's tens of thousands of people who are interested as well. And that's, I think, part of the Trump effect. I'm not going to give him all the credit for it, but I think people are now seeing, because of sacrifices of one important figure, Donald John Trump, that, and then the fact that he won the elected office, right? The battle goes on. It's far from over. That gave people a lot of motivation and a lot of courage to say, well, maybe these crazy conspiracy people were right after all. And then once RFK Jr. was brought in and all these other characters who enjoy sound reputations, despite the fact that they've been defamed, attacked, sued, have their name and their reputation dragged through the mud. People, we Americans at least, view these renegades with a great deal of affection, because that's part of our makeup. Our national, if we have a national character, is that we are a group of people who are dissenters, renegades. We don't like centralized authority. That's why our ancestors came to America, and we still have a living memory of that mentality. And we can apply that to the current battle that is raging. Now, just very briefly, Professor Seralini, Dr. Seralini, was dragged through the mud. He was attacked by not just Monsanto itself, but its various front organizations. Now, this is very important because a lot of us who follow Indian media are not aware that a lot of these people who are popping up, I call them pop-up pundits, are in truth funded by the other side. Right? We're so happy to have all these new allies. I'm not going to call any names out today because I did it last week, and some people who followed them and they felt they were sucker blamed me for the fact that they didn't do their due diligence. So I'm not going to raise suspicion about people like Ian Carroll, who has been anointed as the great new guru by Joe Rogan, Alex. He's making the rounds. There's a whole preview circuit in order to initiate these people, anoint them as being believable and relatable. So I'm going to take the high ground and not go in on him. You're going to make your own decision, I'm sure, and it's going to be the right one. But personally, someone who's been at it for only 2 years is not a credible source, and he talks about it. If you saw the interview with him by Alex Jones himself, most of the questions that were put to him spontaneously on the moment by Alex Jones, he could not answer. He has no training, he has no background. And I'm already violating my pledge right now by going in on him. I'm sorry, I just couldn't keep my own counsel so far as that charlatan is concerned. I think he's also a trust fund baby, like Whitney Webb, those characters. Oops, I did it again, as Britney Spears once sang. And maybe we'll work in some more celebrity accounts as well, because that's all related. What we're hearing about in the P. Diddy case, Kanye West, you name it, these strange, suspicious deaths by quote unquote celebrity pneumonia. Maybe this is all in earlier star whacker type events targeting Randy Quaid, and more recently, perhaps, I don't know, Gene Hackman, although he was 95 years old. But his wife was, I think, in her 60s, and the dog was healthy as well. All three of them died just this past week. So something afoot here, and is afoot, and it's very much related. So let me start by sharing with you a couple of important definitions that's included in the title. Biocide, I hope that's understandable. It's if you take the word homicide, you know that is killing of human beings. Biocide, killing of or damaging of biological entities. Mutagenic might require an official definition, and I'm drawing this from the National Human Genome Research Project. And according to that esteemed body, a mutagen is a chemical or physical agent capable of inducing changes in DNA called mutations. Examples of mutagens include tobacco products, radioactive substances, X-rays, ultraviolet radiation, and a wide variety of chemicals. Exposure to a mutagen can produce DNA mutations that cause or contribute to certain diseases. We might want to include EMF, electromagnetic frequencies, into that list. I think the citizen activist researcher, Lena Poo, I'd have to ask her, would agree that ELF and certain expressions of it can result in certain mutagenic results, right? And of course, we know about transgenic crops already. We know about transgenic species. I won't bore you with a definition on it, but we already see examples of it, living examples of transgenic science in my own previous place of employment. One of the brilliant minds, I mean that ironically, brilliant minds over there in the School of Agriculture managed to fuse the DNA of a pig and a human being. I guess it was Homo sapiens sapiens. And of course, people like H.G. Wells were writing about this. This program, the philosophical and the epistemological foundations were laid out over 100 years ago by these bloodlines, the ones that migrated north from Venice through Switzerland to the United Kingdom and to Germany, Berlin, all the great capitals of the world. And now there's a heavy concentration of them where I live. In California, Northern California in particular, Central California, because it's an agricultural productive center of the world, not just the US, not just California, but of the world. So of course, these forces are going to be concentrated there. And I'll be talking, well, let me just show you one concrete example of this concentration of biocidal entities that are living right amongst us. I've been by this facility here in Woodland, nearby. Woodland is, I think it's in Yolo County, which neighbors Sacramento. And it's very close to UC Davis, University of California, because it's the agricultural center of the United States, many would argue. That's where I taught for 22 years. And that's where I started to run into a lot of trouble when I was lecturing to my students about how the university functioned in this biogenetic warfare against humanity and animals and crops. And here they were blithely going along, majoring in biology, pre-med, chemistry, agricultural science, because they're mostly yellows and they're drawn to the sciences. They've been kind of pushed into that particular area of endeavor. And I'm not putting them down for it, but that's where they found out that they can make their way in American society. Right. And of course, the administration didn't like me to tell young people what they were getting into, warning them about this larger system that was going to use them, their minds, their energy, their labor power, and exploit them and then discard them like so much trash. So here's an example of a company in my backyard that's helping to re-engineer the natural world. Here it is.
Another major expansion got underway today, which will bring jobs to Yolo County. Syngenta holding a groundbreaking ceremony at its Woodland Research and Development and Seed Production facility. This site expansion includes new greenhouses, also specialized plant growth environments, as well as expanded workspace for research and development. Syngenta says this project represents a significant investment and commitment to the local economy.
We've been at this site for 40 years. The community and the climate is very conducive to the type of work that we want to conduct, and it just makes sense to continue that investment in cooperation with this community.
Syngenta is the world's leading crop protection company and is the second largest vegetable seed company in the world. That expansion project expected to be completed in 2014.
Yes, here I am, right out here in Woodland, as I mentioned, and you can't go in there, but you can drive by there, and there are any number of similar facilities that rim UC Davis, which has the largest experimental farms in the entire UC system. In fact, maybe perhaps of all the ag schools in the country. The agricultural stations were created by the Morrill Land Grant, which was passed by the U.S. Congress shortly after the American Civil War. And that's why you have these communities like the University of California, which exist as a sovereign state within a state within a state. And all the great legal scholars and legal people with training, the law schools are not going to do it because they are an arm of Syngenta in this larger system. They would rather advocate for illegal immigrants in so-called immigration law and promote other forms of quote-unquote social justice that are harmful to the large society than to take up the cudgel against these biocidal maniacs that control the economy in the world, right? So we're going to see if RFK is going to manage to fulfill his pledge towards the American people. And his track record, which we'll get to in a moment, bodes very well for the American people. All right. I'm reminding you this because there's a lot of people who are supposedly indie media mavens. They watch all this. Until very recently, were just defeatists. They're saying, oh, yeah, RFK, if he gets into office, he gets elected, he's not going to do anything, right? I heard this so many times until recently by these people who have tons and tons of adherents. They're defeatists. They might as well be on the other team. And when you think about it, that's how they get their massive support by other people who are losers. They like bad news. They like to commiserate. They're just one giant pity party talking about how downtrodden they are, right? Sort of like these bourgeois commentators we see on the news. One of them got her butt fired recently, Joy Reid, talking about how oppressed they are, but they're actually part of the bourgeoisie, right? We have those people in our movement. I'm sorry, I just can't help but go off on some of these characters because they are a bane in our movement. I'm not just talking about these Republicans like Mitch McConnell and these other people that we love to hate. I'm talking about people supposedly who are doing indie research. Here's our friend RFK Jr. I know a lot of people are going to hate me for it. He's a bad guy. Nothing's going to happen to him. Well, just keep crying in your beer. He's going to achieve one success after another with our support. He's not going to do it on his own. He's not Superman. We have to help. We have to maintain the pressure. We have to educate ourselves. We have to express our political will, just like we did recently in the election of November 2024. All right, here he is.
Lawsuits against EPA than any other attorney. When I sued Monsanto, we came across discovery documents that showed that it was an email exchange between the executive officers of Monsanto Corporation with the head of the pesticide division of the EPA for over a decade, a very well-known man named Jess Rowland. He was really secretly working for Monsanto, and they were telling him in these emails, you have to kill this study, you have to falsify this science. We went into court with about 2,400, mainly home gardeners, who had gotten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from using Roundup. And in the first case, we won $289 million from the jury. The second case, we won $89 million. In the first two cases, the judge would not allow us to show that letter, that email exchange to the jury. But in the third case, the judge allowed us to do it. And we asked the jury for $1 billion, and they came back with $2.2 billion. And that forced Monsanto finally to come to the table.
Well, that was from RFK Jr.'s presidential campaign literature, but his record stands. He is a winner. All right, join the winning team. Shed your loser mentality. And there's a lot to feel bad about. Historically, for the last several decades, we've been pounded to a pulp. So we have to regain our confidence as winners. And there's nothing better than winning that will that will accomplish that feat. So let's keep feeding on it. Okay. Again, I will mention the fact that Dr. Seralini, Professor Seralini, specifically, he's just one, but he's one of the more prominent ones, given his stature within the field, who was targeted by Monsanto and its clones, its offshoots. Many of them were supposedly indie researchers. Many of them were supposedly indie bloggers. Some supposedly were indie academic journals, but they all had a common source of funding and support, a Monsanto company of St. Louis, Missouri, right? Which is now part of Bayer, or Bayer, if you will. They decided to get out from under the bad name, the bad reputation that's built for themselves, and perhaps even from the lawsuits, the judgments that were assessed against them, and said, we're going to go under the Bayer corporate logo. And on your own, you go check out the Bayer Corporation and see their origins. And guess what? As I alluded to earlier, all roads lead back to Switzerland, right? Remember Klaus Schwab? Remember him? His father worked for Escher Weiss, WYSS. That's a Swiss company. Those are the people that help into the mass production of the flamethrower, right? And all kinds of goodies, technologies like that. And Weiss is also part of the biocidical complex, right? If and as I've said, the science is already in, but if you need further convincing, let's just watch a few seconds of this gentleman here, a medical doctor and a researcher, and he's one of many voices that have been suppressed, and I don't think they can be held back anymore. Right? I think the battle has been, I won't say won, but the tide of the battle has been changed in the good guys' favor. That's you and me. However, the other news is that they're going to keep us focusing on quote unquote glyphosate and environmental toxins, which is all well and good. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, the black goo and the third state life forms that are being worked on that we know very little about at this point, except through the movies like Alien. Maybe that's really what's up their sleeve, right? We can see the crops, we can see the Syngenta factory, and we can review the literature, but maybe that's not the end game. Maybe these xenomorphs are really what it's about, like I have on the pic here, right? That's right from Alien. That came from the fervid imagination of a Swiss, again, Switzerland, artist by the name of H.R. Giger, who died some years ago. He's the guy that designed all the alien characters and is responsible for all this really creepy airbrush sort of bio machine synthesized representations. That seemed to be a preoccupation of a lot of authoritarian regimes going back to ancient times, to the present, to the Weimar Republic, right? I have one book here. Where is it? I don't have it. Oh, here it is. She wrote a novel about it and a screenplay. It's called Metropolis. You know it as the classic film by Fritz Lang, who, by the way, wound up in Pacific Palisades. He's long dead by now. But here's the book about her whole worldview. And she was a lifelong Nazi, Metropolis. And she had the robots and the biogenetic hybrids, the ones that H.R. Giger and James Cameron and those characters are still foisting them on the American public. So we have at least one or two generations who've grown up with it now, and it's become normalized. These are the same people who are part of this massive militant transgender movement that's very well funded and pushed. It came out of academia, and it was funded by USAID and all of these other entities. They're not going away anytime soon. You need to be alert to it. You need to listen to Andy No, Unmasked. He's been reporting. He's not the only one, but he's the one that's been getting the most play on the militant transgender. And apparently, as one of my critics from last week told me, he said, well, Andy No is gay. Why are you gay bashing? Well, I didn't know he was gay. And my talk about militant transgenderism was not about gay or straight. It was about the human species and why militant transgenderism is one of the weapons to take us to this brave new world that's been theorized a long time ago, right? So don't get it twisted. Don't get it confused. Try to think out of your little box that you've been placed in. Supposedly, you're aware and you're alert and all that. Congratulations, right? and the militant transgenders themselves do not realize that they're a biogenetic degradation tool. All they know is that they're getting their jollies by parading their much self-admired identity, right? It's sort of a new take on discredited identity politics, right? So let's hear one more scientist before we move on to hear what he has to say.
Endocrine disruptors during pregnancy may have grandchildren with neurodevelopmental deficits. This is healthcare triage news. The prevalence of many neurodevelopmental
Oh, sorry. My machine here we go.
increasing. One of these is women exposed to endocrine disruptors during pregnancy may have grandchildren with neurodevelopmental deficits. This is healthcare triage news. The prevalence of many neurodevelopmental disorders is increasing. One of these is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. While some may try to minimize it, kids with ADHD have been shown to have issues with quality of life and educational attainment. They can also have problems in adulthood, including premature death. We still don't know what causes ADHD. One theory involves endocrine disrupting chemicals, which have been linked to a number of neurodevelopmental disorders, including ADHD. EDCs, as they are otherwise known, can involve an epigenetic reprogramming of the germline. This means they can cause DNA changes that are passed on to future generations. In mice, studies have shown that EDC exposure can change behavior and stress responses in third-generation offspring, and social interaction changes have been seen in fifth-generation offspring. Few multi-generational cohorts exist to allow us
All right, you get a better idea of some of the research that's indicating fundamental problems with endocrine disruptor, right? And then that brings us back to Monsanto, Bayer, Syngenta, and other related companies, right? Now, I forgot to mention one person. This is someone I read years ago. His name is Brian Tokar. He teaches or did teach at the University of Vermont. And I'll post this to my Patreon people. This is a more simplified history of Monsanto, right? Prior to its being absorbed into the Bayer or Bayer conglomerate. It gives you the whole background here. Now, there's still some research that needs to be done here. I would like to know myself if, for example, if there indeed is a Society of Jesus connection to Monsanto, because I got that comment. I read it someplace before. I never was able to find the receipts on that one. So if you have definitive information, that's the type of comment that I really value down here below. Not little nitpicking comments like, it's not Tyrone or Todd Haynes, it's Tyrone Hayes. Yeah, I know that. One of them's a director that does creepy films, right? And the other one's a well-established biologist at the University of California. A lot of these, the good ones, the good scientists, I don't know what went wrong. They didn't screen them out properly, but a lot of them are at the University of California. And I want to state that, right? Because I don't want you to slip into resignation and to become a loser, right? Yes, Syngenta, Monsanto, Bayer, they pretty much own the research facilities, and not just the UC, but all the ag schools. They own them lock, stock, and barrel, right? And that's going to be one of my solutions that I'm going to be proposing to cure this, because I'm about making a change here, not just pointing out problems here. And that's decoupling corporations from academic research or even private research, but funded research, let's call it. All right. But let me finish my point. There's Tyrone Hayes. He ran afoul of Syngenta and other sponsors. He was a big shot at UC University of California, Berkeley, because he was a big money maker. In the sciences, you get all the grants Man, it might get to the point where you even get your own laboratory with your name on it. So he was a rainmaker, funded research. And of course, the university takes its cut, can be up to 40%, right? He doesn't get any, real money for himself. His salary is taken care of by the university, but for materials, hiring research assistants, and staging conferences and all their supplies, all that is funded by these corporations that want certain types of results. So that's Tyrone Hayes, professor, who we talked about last week. You can check him out some more. He has quite a big profile on the socials and publication. You can find him. Lesser known, and I want to give them credit because there are many heroes in this long-term struggle, not just RFK Jr. And I'm not really positive, but I suspect that RFK Jr. Took advantage of the research done by Professor Seralini in doing his lawsuits against the big boys, right? So it works hand in hand. It has a possible beneficial purpose here, this science. So we have Dr. Tyrone Hayes. We also have Professor Peter Duesberg. He was the person, he was at Berkeley also. He was the person that got me started on doing my own research on so-called AIDS, right? And all the whole infrastructure that was built on it that was exploited way back when by people like Dr. Anthony Fauci. That was Peter Duesberg. It got so bad for him. He was a top cancer researcher. He was discarded by the establishment. They couldn't fire him because it wouldn't look so good, the administration, but they made sure they took away his lab and they put him down in a basement with no windows. And I know those rooms. Whenever I got in trouble with the administration, they'd say, okay, we're going to meet in the basement of the administration building. The chancellor's on 4, 5, or 4. I can't remember how tall Murac Hall is, but they have a basement down there. And that's where they beat up on people like me. They get out the rubber hose. There's no windows in there. It's an interrogation. So that was my home away from home. I got in trouble a lot with these people from snitches. Most of them were students who wanted to become famous researchers or find the cure to brain cancer or a cure to AIDS. And they didn't like that I was urinating on their big dreams of professional glory. So they were yellows too. They were Vietnamese and various, all kinds of ethnicities. Maybe their dads were snitches back in Vietnam, so they kind of epigenetically inherited this sort of snitch mentality, rat out people, point them out to the assassins and get rid of them so they can take their homes and their possessions. Even though I was very aggressively anti, I didn't want them to bomb the South Vietnamese allies back into the Stone Age. But here, years later, ironically, these are the ones that were ratting me out at UC Davis. Thank you very much. It's one of the reasons why I pretty much turned my back on so-called Asian American studies, because of rats like them. So thank you for helping me see the light. So there's Peter Duesberg, and the other person is another scientist. His name, I believe his Christian name is Ernesto. It's Chapela. He was Mexican national. I think he's a U.S. citizen, like all of them are naturalized. But he got in trouble at UC Berkeley because he, again, got funded by the big boys and was saying, hey, these BT corn seeds are getting mixed in with the heritage corn down in Mexico. And the heritage corn in Mexico is protected constitutionally. It's in the Mexican Constitution. Maize is their national food. That's the source of their civilization. And who was trying to corrupt it? Monsanto. And he published these results. And he did it while he was an assistant professor. So his department and the people behind the leadership there tried to deny him tenure. That's how they control these people. Right? So he fought that in the courts, and he prevailed. Okay, another win. I want you to start thinking from a winner's perspective, because winning breeds winning. You need to hear these stories. Now, there's one connection that I had with Professor Duisberg and Professor Chapella, and that is that they had the same attorney I had in representing them, Dan Siegel. Now, he was a raving leftist. He told me he was a Maoist. He was once the president of the SDS, Students for Democratic Society. He went to Berkeley. He went to Berkeley Law. He was a radical of the radical. But I hired him to learn the system, how it works. And I paid out of my own pocket because I knew that I was going to it was like my tuition. And it turns out he was quite familiar with the system. He'd sued them so many times, representing Chapella and Duisberg. But he really couldn't figure out why little old me, some Oriental guy, was causing so much trouble to the administration. Why? Because I was teaching that war. I was teaching that research. I was teaching that battle to my students, my undergraduate students, and teaching assistants who were studying at the graduate level, and talking about how the University of California really operates. All right. So that, again, that's one of my personal connections, as these stories tend to, I've been around so long, I'm sort of like a Zillig. I'm these different historical points, intersections. All right. Since we're talking about the University of California, Berkeley, I've mentioned her before. I've been mentioning her name, calling her out for years now. This is long before Ramaswamy came around with his anti-woke book that he tried to parlay into the U.S. presidency. This is long before all these other characters start appearing. I called her out in some of the big three. I'll just focus on one. Her name's Judith Butler. I think she has some sort of honorific chair at the University of California in English or comparative literature, or whatever. Another UC, she's, I think, at Santa Cruz, Donna Haraway. They're all promoting, through supposedly women, gender, and sexuality studies, this biomechanical future. Donna Haraway, for example, wrote a classic essay on cyborgs, which the people in my Patreon have, because I gave you that whole reader on transgenderism. It is an academic line of inquiry. You may think it's weird, and you might have heard some comedian on YouTube making fun about it, or some of these other characters who we can get a big chuckle out of, right? Mention these, but this is very real in its existence and its political import. We have to keep their names in the forefront of this battle. But the one I'm referring to more immediately is Judith Butler. Now, one thing is interesting is that they all have anglicized names, Butler. Well, there's a couple other ones, but from a ethno-religious perspective, they all are apostates of Judaism, right? So I'm wondering if, like, their ancestors came from Ukraine, like Zelensky and some of these guys that migrated as Bolsheviks to the U.S. and brought Sabbatean Frankism to the U.S. Because this, as many of you correctly, I think, pointed out last week, this does have this overtone of a Sabbatean Frankist agenda, but in the guise of hard science. So as Rabbi Jonathan Kant would say, these are people who are Jews who turn their face away from God. And God will punish the society. They'll punish them, but the problem is we're going to be punished along with them for accepting their orthodoxy of perversion and deviance and abomination and biogenetic degradation. So here she is. They gave her a promo spot because they need to get the donor money in from the Levi Strauss company, the head of Levi Strauss family. I forgot his name. He's now the mayor of San Francisco, by the way. Right. So the leftist woke corporate people, many of them still down in Silicon Valley as well, are still very much funding the money, passing the money through these people. Just because USAID is gone or is on the way out does not mean that these people are lacking funding. Keep that in mind. Stop celebrating prematurely.
So there are many different theories of gender, and mine is just one. Sometimes people who really hate gender name me as the one who made this up, but that's actually not true. You know, in my view, everybody has a theory of gender. And what I mean by that is that everybody has certain assumptions going about what gender is or should be. And at a certain point in life, we ask ourselves, wow, where did that assumption come from? At this point, I'm less concerned about whose theory is right and whose theory is wrong, because the assault on gender is also an assault on democracy. We have the power and the freedom to make more livable lives for ourselves, where bodies can be more free to breathe, to move, to love without discrimination and without fear of violence. I am Judith Butler, Distinguished Professor in the Graduate School at the University of California at Berkeley. I teach literature, philosophy, and critical theory, and I'm most well known for my 2 books on gender, Gender Trouble and Bodies That Matter, from the early 1990s. My work has been translated into more than 27 languages.
So Judith Butler is one of the big wheels that are behind this militant transgender revolution that we're just laughing off, right? Because Trump is in charge and everything's cool now. And we have Louder with Crowder to laugh. And who's that other guy? I can't remember. They have all these different pop-up pundits who they're just getting over by name calling and moralizing and creating yucks, right? I'm saying this is a serious threat that we are facing, and now it's turned militant, it's turned violent, right? So now you better start waking up to the fact that these people have not gone away. They're doubling down. They're hunkering down for a more basic, physically confrontational battle, right? And they're talking about, not when I say they, I'm talking about a massive. If you want to look on your own, go through TubeView. There's tons of material. There's tons of published articles. There's tons of books that are still being written, advancing what they call, here's the phrase, write this one down. It's called the queer future, or queer-futures. It's being put out there as an accomplished fact, a fait accompli, right? Only the details have to be worked out, but they are strategizing and implementing their worldview of a genderless eusocial, that is asexual reproduction future, where reproduction is solely in the hands of the corporate state. It's no longer between man and woman. It's between whatever form of government you happen to be living under, a techno government. That's the true meaning of all this theater that's going on right now. It's this transformation that goes back at least to the ancient Greeks of the eugenics pioneers of creating little republics of synthesized individuals, right? Analogized with the bees and the flies, the use of the types of species that reproduce without sexual reproductive processes. That's eusocial, right? This is why people like Alfred Kinsey specialized in the gull wasp, right? Or they're interested in parthenogenesis, right? Reproduction apart, quote unquote, reproduction apart from male and female genetics mingling in the human being. So we will be just like those ants. There'll be one queen bee. It'll be Judith Butler at the top, and all the rest of the drones, like me, all Oriental drones, our yellow people. We will bring the rice to the queen, Judith Butler, and Donna Haraway, and Hillary Clinton, and Joy Reid, and all these other people, and Nancy Pelosi. And that's how we disrupt. That's how we get rid of what they call hetero, as in heterosexual, heteropatriarchy. So the women will be in control. If there's going to be any species, there's going to be a select queen bee of the hive that's going to be allowed to live. And the rest of us are going to be asexual, non-reproductive, right? And I was watching some old teen comedies from decades ago with a friend of mine who grew up in that era. And she said, you know what? The kids back then who were watching or being portrayed on Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Porky's and American Pie, says, man, they were really horny. They were all interested in having sex with each other. And she says, but today, the high school kids, they're not interested in sex at all. And some of the girls are very frustrated. They're kind of puzzled. What happened? How come I don't have a boyfriend? How come I'm not married? Because men have had that taken up by the BPA, by the toxins. So generationally, it's already coming into play. And the queer theory people, the post-humanists, the transhumanists, like your Judith Butlers, your Sabbatean Frankists, like her and Donna Haraway, those people, and there are others. There are many, many more wannabes below that, right? They're part of the cover that's being laid down for this biogenetic degradation process that these Swiss companies are putting into play. And of course, it has the globalist organization, the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, he is of the Weiss family, to put that in universal play from every single country. And you see this going on through all the Western European countries. Russia has not gone along with the program. It's one of the reasons why Ukraine is being used as a wedge to force them into compliance with biogenetic degradation of the rest of the planet. But it's already in play, as I mentioned last week, in South Korea, in Japan, in most of the Southeast Asian countries, and in West Asia. And this is called the queer future. Here's one of the local proponents of queer futures. He's not really an academic, but he's got academic funding. He works for a think tank that is related to the Rand Corporation. You've heard about them. I don't need to go into it. And he's talking very presumptuously about the queer futures. That's their operative phrase, queer future. Here he is.
This statistic, which I learned last year and has really become one of my North Stars. Researchers at the Family Acceptance Project at San Francisco State University, one question they're asked is, do you believe that you will ever be a happy LGBT adult? For queer youth who come from families rated extremely accepting, 92% 92% are able to imagine themselves in happy futures. For queer youth from families who outright shun or reject them, only 35% have this ability. Think about that for a minute. 2/3 of LGBTQ young people who had the misfortune to be born to families that cannot accept them have lost the ability to imagine their future selves being happy. I can't see how losing that ability is any different from losing one's fundamental sense of hope. Hope for themselves, hope for the world, hope for their individual future or ours collectively. So it's phenomena like this that happen every day, anywhere an LGBTQ kid is growing up, knowing that they're different, afraid to express it. Even in the most progressive regions, let alone the most conservative, that motivates me to keep queering the future and showing that the future.
So he and along with his cronies are going to queer the future. You better take him seriously, take him at his word. This is aggressive, it's militant, and it didn't go away just because Donald Trump and Doge came in to being. All right, I'm telling you. Right? And they're doing it to my people, the yellows of the world, because where do you think a lot of this preliminary experimentation was done? These gender bending treatments, hormones and whatnot, feminizing hormones in particular, of aggressive, virile, yellow warrior people, right? You go to Japan and the J-pop people are all queer. So are all the K-pop guys. They are all queer. They were experimenting in Thailand specifically, outside the purview of regulations that are enforced here in the US and Canada and other Western societies. That's where you have the Katai people, right? But now it's being blown back into the US, and the yellow people of America are being queered. And that's why in Hollywood movies, when there is a yellow man on it, he's definitely queer. Even Zulu in the new Star Trek starring John Cho is gay. Same with crazy rich Asians. So in order to get around that embargo, you're going to have to watch Cha-Con movies. You're going to have to watch movies from Japan and from Hong Kong. And even then, they've been infiltrated by the transgenic, mutagenic, cinematic agenda. And if you don't think it's an agenda, you missed the broadcast where I talked about my experience with the Annenberg School of Cinema down at USC. I was brought in there as a media specialist to suggest ways that the film industry and the television, the media industry can bring yellow people into queerdom. And it was by a guy named Grossberg, Larry Grossberg or Grossman? Yeah, Larry Gross. Yeah, check him out. He's there. He's Canadian by now. He's Five Eyes. And you know where the Annenberg comes from. It's a globalist organization. It started out with Mo Annenberg, the big mafia media guy. And they control the research, and they control, by extension, Nickelodeon, right? Michelle Trachtenberg turned up dead, 39 years old the other day, right? So this has resonance all the way through our culture. So here's an example of one of the flaming queers that you're going to see more and more of thanks to Hollywood, even though part of it burned down with the Pacific Palisades. It was an auto de fe. Here it is.
The funny things about growing up different is that before you knew you were different, other kids told you that you were different.
Sorry. Let me put him on.
The funny things about growing up different is that before you knew you were different, other kids told you that you were different.
The first time I realized I was different was actually at home life and the kind of expectations my parents had for me.
I was 3 years old, and I remember trying on one of my sister's dresses. I think it was my dad like pulling it off of me.
I remember I would always lock myself in my grandmother's room, and then there was always this one red lipstick. Picked it up one day, just drew it all over my lips. I also knew that it was something that I was ashamed of or I would get scolded for.
In grade school,
Well, it goes on and on. It's being pushed. It's being heavily promoted. There's a lot of production dollars going into this. And there are a lot of men who prefer this type of katai. That's why they go in large numbers to places like Thailand, even now. Now, just imagine people like Adam Schiff don't have to go overseas. They can just find them in LA all over the place. These are the American katai. All right. And they're doing it through the popular culture, science fiction in particular. They're holding panels to make sure that these transgenic themes make their way into science fiction, short stories, novels, graphic novels, comic books, and movies.
Hi, everybody. My name
it's really
is
like-
Carter Munir.
Yeah, the dichotomy
and
between
welcome to,
being on-
I guess, the first panel of SPX 2019. This one is about, let me check the slide, queer sci-fi and world building. I am joined by 4 superstars in that discipline. And what I'm going to do is just go down the table, and I would ask that each of you shares your name and pronouns, please.
I'm Hannah Templer, and my pronouns are she, they.
I'm Rosemary Valero O'Connell, and my pronouns are she, they.
Oh, wow, it's going to go really down. I'm Allison Wilgus, and my pronouns are also she, they.
I'm Shingyan Kaur, and my pronouns are they, them.
Perfect. I took notes. And my pronouns are she, her. I'm
a transsexual woman.
There you have it. I think that's South by Southwest or some sort of film festival with all these established and up-and-coming science fiction writers. So hopefully, this second part of this extension of last week's talk, hopefully allows you a better, more full, nuanced understanding of why a Brigitte Macron becomes an issue, right? I don't care if it's a dude in a dress. That's not the point. Some of you didn't really understand that. I don't care if you're wearing a dress or not, right? It's about the underlying biogenetic degradation of the human species, which is part of this cabal centered in Switzerland of these companies, they're called big pharma companies. This plan that's been unfolding for at least a century now. And if we ever defeat the agenda, and I think we will, we're going to look back, that is, historians, commentators are going to look back and say, how did people let it go on for so long? Just like they look back at atrocities committed by the Imperial Japanese Army and say, how come the world didn't do anything when all this was going on through China, Mongolia, and other parts of Asia, Okinawa? What was the world when this was going on in Germany and Austria and Poland and other occupied countries? What was going on here? It's exterminationism. So we have to come to the point of high seriousness to see, understand, and politically grapple with the biogenetic degradation of humankind. And I will leave you with a little bit of Alien. I hope it isn't taken down. You'll get to see it in the live stream, but I might get a copyright strike. So people watching this later, you might not know what I'm talking about. but I'm going to put it in here now for the people who are lovely enough to join us here in the live stream. But that's what the film, this is a preliminary now, don't hold me to it. But this is what the whole Alien quote unquote franchise is about. It's about the black goo. It's about this third form, life form that is going to take over or retake planet Earth. So we have H.R. Giger, I guess his name, it's pronounced, the Swiss artist who create these xenomorphs threatening us, humanity.
Of the new Alien Romulus film, fans are looking back on previous entries in the franchise, especially Prometheus, which delved into the origins of the Xenomorphs. Hello everyone, today we're going to dive into the connection between the latest installment and Ridley Scott's prequels. And be warned, there will be crucial spoilers for Alien Romulus. Let's start with a quick recap of the previous movies. Die-hard fans who know every detail by heart can skip to the next section using the timestamps. In the year 2093, the spaceship Prometheus embarks on a journey into space with a crew of scientists in search of the engineers, the creators of mankind. They are guided by a star map discovered on Earth, which leads them to the planet LV-223. The expedition is led by Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway and funded by the Weyland Corporation, led by Peter Weyland, who thirsts for immortality and secretly travels in a cryogenic capsule. His daughter, Meredith Vickers, and the android, David 8, observe everything that happens. Arriving on LV-223, the crew discovers an ancient structure where they find vases containing black goo, a substance capable of both giving and taking life. David secretly brings the goo aboard the ship and poisons Holloway's drink. Soon he falls ill, and Shaw, though infertile, discovers she's pregnant after a close encounter with Holloway. Later, in a medical capsule, she extracts a terrifying creature that has developed inside her under the influence of the black goo. Meanwhile, a series of tragic events unfolds on the planet. Crew members perish, and those who survive awaken an enraged engineer. Weyland himself dies a horrible death. Shaw and the android David, who has lost his body but retained his head, are left alone in a dangerous world with even more dangerous secrets. In 2017, Alien Covenant, a sequel to Prometheus, was released. It chronicles the fate of Elizabeth Shaw and David, who eventually reach on of the engineers' planets. Driven by his desire to create the perfect life form, David begins experimenting with the black goo. His actions lead to the annihilation of all engineers on the planet. Shaw also dies and becomes one of David's experimental subjects. At the end of the Covenant, David seizes control of a colony ship headed to the planet Origea 6, attracted by a signal sent by David.
Well, you can watch these. There's several of them. There are many of them of these timeline, these recaps. I personally find them very, very useful in helping to jog my memory. And not all the assessments are spot on, and they might not be interpreting the way I would. But the point is that they are taking us through all the different elements that are a through line, let's call it, a thread throughout the whole Alien series of movies. So I think it's very important to revisit it. I'm excited about it. I remember seeing the very first one by Ridley Scott in a movie theater when they were still important in our society, right? And I'm going to take it all the way to the prequels, and hopefully I'll be able to share some of this information to you. Also, if in the comments, if you have come across an intelligent essay about the Alien franchise, please put the reference down there. I'm trying to find books and academic articles on it that break it down. But so far, the people who are doing this material on YouTube have provided me with the best insight on what the Alien film series is really about. It's about transgeneticism or transhumanism, if you prefer. It's about the biogenetic degradation of planet Earth, but in this case, as it's being implemented by off-planet entities, all right, which again is being seriously discussed in the highest circles of government and military. All right. I don't know. I don't know if I was able to pull these different threads together, but I tried my best. And I'm going to keep pulling at it because, as I have stated throughout this talk, this is serious business. Yes, some of these people are laughable. They could be the butt of jokes of all the retread comedians who now are pundits for our audience. Sure, I get it. I can even laugh along with that. But I assure you that the threat to free and sovereign humanity is very real, and it's only going to intensify before it is conquered. And it will. We will prevail on this, but only if we provide a counter educational force to this huge propaganda effort that has all the support of the major globalist corporations, NATO, the United Nations, all of it. We have a huge struggle in front of us, ladies and gentlemen, but I have utmost confidence in you and me that we are going to be able to successfully prevail in this contest, this battle. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you back at the proper time, 4 p.m. PDT, God willing. Thank you. We'll see you next week. Bye.